Now then, I know we've done some demos already, but you can never have too many demos, right? Anyway, what we'll do here is we'll take a look at the storage in the sample app. So this is the manifest for the MySQL component of the app, and it's in the course notes under MySQL WordPress PD. Okay, if you've done the networking module, you'll be cool with the service here. But this down here is what we're interested in, a persistent volume claim. And it's pretty simple, right? It's got a name and a label. Now, we'll reference the name later in the pod spec, so we'll put that up here. But the label, that gives us additional metadata that we can use to filter and make like loose couplings and stuff like that, right? Now then, this is a claim for read-write-once access and it wants 20 gig. All good, right? But it's not referencing a storage class. Interesting. Well, we'll come to that in a second. Alright, well next up's the deployment. A bunch of deployment stuff that we're not really interested in at the moment. But then, under the pod spec here, we've got a volume definition. So, we're calling this volume MySQL persistent storage. So, within the pod spec, we're defining a volume and we're giving it a name. But look, we're basing it on the claim from above. See how it matches the name in the claim? Brilliant. Well, drilling into the container definition, it's not hard to see that we're mounting this very same volume by name to varlib MySQL inside the MySQL container. So we've got most of the puzzle, right? The PV claim, the volume definition in the pod spec, and it's being mounted in a container. So far so good. But that's actually it. There actually is nothing else. And we can deploy this and it'll work. But there's no PV and there's no storage class, so how will it work? Well, the secret's in something called a default storage class on the cluster. And anytime you've got a default storage class and you don't specify storage class name in the PV claim, you'll get that default. Now, I'm on a cluster in Azure this time. Got to spread that cloud love, yeah? And I do love the shorter names. But if we look at storage classes, these are set up by default on every AKS cluster, at least the ones I've used. And this default in the brackets? Well, yeah, this is the default class. Now, the name here can be anything, right? It's just coincidence that AKS calls it default. Anyway, look, right now we've got no PVs and we should have no claims. Right. Now, I'm in a directory here where I've got the YAML file that we were just looking at, so I can deploy it. Actually, you know what? No. Before I do that, the deployment needs a secret. So this command here, right? That will imperatively create a new secret called MySQL pass. Now, the name of this secret is referenced in the YAML file for the MySQL password, right? And yeah, you gotta love a strong password. Come on, we've all done it, right? Though, actually, just to cover my back, don't do stupid things like this in production. Okay, well that all looks good. Yeah, so we'll deploy the app now. Let's check that that's taken. And okay, it's in the process of deploying, but any PVs and claims should already be there. Now then, because there's only going to be one PV on the system, we can run it like this without getting the name first. Okay, so storage class here is default. Now, that's the name of the class actually, not the fact that it's the default class. It just happens, right? Remember, AKS calls the default class default. I think if you're on GKE, normally it's called standard. Anyway, look, it's bound. Reclaim policy here is delete and read write once for the access mode. Oh, and 20 gigs, yeah? Now, look, if you get a discrepancy here, maybe 22 gigs or something, there's a good chance that that's down to gigabytes versus gibibytes. Yeah. The old, is a gigabyte 1000 megabytes or 1024? Look, like I said, storage scars from my past, but I'm just saying, right, if you get some number discrepancies, it might be due to storage counting quirks. Now then, these bits here, they're a mix of info about the actual storage backing the PV, plus maybe an attribute or two, like if it's got a file system, you might see ext4 here, right? But that's the PV. What about the PVC? Well, again, there's only one, right? So I can run it without the name. And yeah, again, as we'd expect, some matching values. So the storage class matches default, yeah? Remember, we didn't specify a storage class in the YAML file, so it defaulted to whatever was the default on the cluster. It's bound, yeah? That means the storage class was able to create a PV matching its requirements on the fly. We asked for 20 gig, yeah? And read-write once. Oh yeah, and under events here, I like this, right? Provisioning succeeded. Remember, it was provisioned on demand via the cluster's default storage class. Like just now, yeah? A minute ago. So that's the PV and the PVC. And if we describe the pod, again, we don't need the name because it's the only one on this cluster. Whoa, okay. But if we look here, under volumes, that's it there. Name, type, and claim, and a bit more as well. But that's how it is in the sample app. A PVC dynamically creates a PV using the cluster's default storage class. And you know what? It's the same for the WordPress front-end bit. That has a volume for var www HTML. Pretty good stuff. And that's it, right? But it's been a lot, so I do think a recap will be well worth your time.